So in a previous video, I talked about why, in my opinion, the new Yogi Bear show, or basically season 2.5 or season 3 of the Yogi Bear show overall, was revived in 1988, and why I believe it connected to the Superstar 10 movies, and why it took basically the last Yogi Bear film in that to correlate with the series. Because in my opinion, as I mentioned, basically I believe the other two Yogi Bear movies came about due to the fact that they were going into production or were already in production. Well, the revitalization of the Yogi Bear show was, just getting started, basically getting off the ground. And thus, when it was in development itself, basically the voice acting and all that, that's when we got the movie of Invasion of the Space Bears. But speaking of movies, one thing that, as I mentioned in that video, that to me connects this 1988 revising of the Yogi Bear show to the original is basically the movie. The 1964 movie, which, by the way, next year will celebrate 60 years of existence. That's right. Next year will be the 60th anniversary officially of Hey There, It's Yogi Bear. And to celebrate early, Warner Brothers through the Warner Archive released the movie on Blu-ray. Maybe next year we might get a more 4K release as time goes on. But getting back on topic, one thing about Hey There, It's Yogi Bear that basically was carried over into the revitalization of the Yogi Bear show for the late 80s was something that, a lot of fans, were kind of glad to see. You see, in the early Yogi Bear show, I should say, mostly in Wooing Brewing, if you will, and all that, as well as Acrobatic Bear, but mostly Wooing Brewing, and then in the 3-part finale, which was just basically one whole episode, Happy Birthday Yogi, it was pretty much evident that Yogi and Cindy had a thing. They had a thing for each other. Mostly with Wooing Brewing and Happy Birthday Yogi. They had a thing. There is no doubt. But in the movie, they kind of played that off to where they had a thing, but now they were basically they kind of were a thing, but not in the way that Cindy would want, nor in the way that Yogi would admit. Because of the fact that in the movie, Yogi was a little bit more standoffish. Like, he knew how Cindy felt about him, and he pretty much felt the same way, but he was trying to hide it because his main goal was to basically, of course, go after picnic baskets whenever he could. And, by doing so, keep his bachelor-like status still alive. However, in the movie, there is a moment where Yogi gets visited by his inner self. And he's singing basically a reprise of Like I Like You, which was originally sang by Cindy earlier in the film. And he basically realizes that being a mysterious, thief, of food, a brown phantom, is not as joyful as he thought, and that he misses Boo Boo. But that's when his inner self shows up and says, you're wrong. Because basically his inner self shows up and calls him out on that. He says, it ain't Boo Boo you miss, it's Cindy. And basically when Yogi says, well, hey, you should mind your own business and everything about that, the inner self has to remind him, hey, I'm your inner self, so your business is my business. And then he points down below. On the ground, what Yogi had been doodling, tracing with a piece of, with a wooden stick, which is a heart shape with the words, Yogi loves Cindy. And that's basically when Yogi realizes, dang, even with your inner self, you can't keep a secret around here anymore. And that's essentially what the key was. That's essentially the key. That was essentially the key the entire time. Yogi basically had a thing for Cindy. He loves Cindy. But again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, he doesn't want it to, he basically doesn't want a relationship with Cindy to interfere with the possibility of him getting picnic baskets and all that. But when his inner self, basically, I guess you could say not physically, but, figuratively slaps, some sense into him and makes him realize that, hey, this bachelor hermit thing you're doing ain't for you. You need to go find Cindy and tell her you love her, which Yogi finally admits to basically realizing, yeah, I need to do that. I need to get on with my life. I need to not just go after picnic baskets all the time. I need to settle down. Like, I could still do my thing, but I need to settle down for the future. And the reason I bring this up is because it's interesting to note that, yes, they do fully become an item officially. Yogi finally acknowledging how he feels about her, singing the VENMO song to her, coming to her aid and stuff. It's like pretty much, Yogi has come to accept, because he is smarter than the average bear, that, yeah, he can have a relationship with Cindy, but he's just got to find a way to balance it. And as we find out in the Yogi Bear show, well, basically the 88 revitalization of it, pretty much he's been able to do that because again, the reason I bring this up is because I like the fact that in this version, they carry basically that, they carry over the fact that Yogi and Cindy are now an item. Yogi likes seeing her a lot more. There's even an episode or short in there where Yogi envisions, having a family with Cindy. It's a short called Bringing Up Yogi. He envisions having a future with her. And there's other instances as well. There's other instances as well, like Battle of the Bears, where Yogi goes over and essentially, Yogi goes over to her cave and finds out that she's been put into a prearranged marriage when she was one that she didn't even know about until just recently. There's the instances of Hanna-Barbera Bear and all that. So there is a lot of instances, in the new Yogi Bear show that pretty much, show that Cindy and Yogi are an item. Biker Bear is another one, you name it. And then, of course, the movie that correlates with it, which was the final Yogi Bear movie in the Superstar 10, Invasion of the Space Bears. So again, I like the idea that, I like the idea that, hey there, Yogi Bear, the romance that finally got developed there with Cindy and Yogi got carried over into the new revived 1988 Yogi Bear series, the season 2.0, season 3, if you will. Now, before anybody says anything, I do know and I do realize Yogi and Cindy were an item when she made appearances in Yogi's Gang in the early 1970s, as well as in Yogi's Treasure Hunt in the mid-80s. I get that. I understand that. I mean, heck, it's the episode in the Yogi's Treasure Hunt in the episode To Be or Not to Be, when Yogi basically, arrives along with the gang to Yogi's beef farm, and she tells them the bad news, and Yogi's like, so there's no, you mean you got no sweethearts for your sweetheart? Oh, the agony. Basically it's acknowledged they are an item. They are an item. But again, you get that more evidently in the new Yogi Bear series, or Yogi Bear series season 2.5, season 3 in 1988. You get that more evidently because that's more connected continuity-wise, to the original Yogi Bear series in the 1960s and Hey There's Yogi Bear. So again, despite those other instances, and you can bring those up and say those are connected as well, and that's true. If you take out, and this is the truth, if you take out, the entire group of other Hanna-Barbera characters, in Treasure Hunt and and Yogi's gang, and you just leave Yogi and Boo Boo and Cindy, and in the case of Treasure Hunt, Ranger Smith. If you just leave them, then pretty much you have that connection. You have that connection of carrying over, and I like that, because let's be honest. They could have easily, and I mean this, they could have easily, long story short, they could have easily, ignored the romance that happened in Hey There, Yogi Bear, but they didn't. They carried that over, and I appreciate that. And I know I'm not the only one. But let me know what you guys' thoughts are. How do you feel about the romance of Yogi and Cindy carrying over from Hey There, Yogi Bear and basically into the revised Yogi Bear series in 1988, as well as Invasion of the Space Bears? How did you feel about that? Were you glad that they did not forget about that romance? Were you glad that they kept it going? And were you glad that Yogi is now, I guess you could say, more open, in the revised series of having a family with Cindy than he was previously, in the early portions of the movie, as well as maybe, elsewhere. Let me know what your thoughts are. Super chats are open in the live chat during the premiere. Like the video. Also, check out the Teespring store for merchandise you can't get anywhere else, as well as to help celebrate my 15 years here on YouTube. There's merchandise based around that. Also, check me out at patreon.com/BWRoses. Also, check out BW Roses Discussions, where you'll find audio podcast versions of these videos, down the line, when I get a chance to do that. But again, let me know what your thoughts are, guys. I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. And until then, I'll talk to y'all later.